Miss Carol for playing the piano and bringing a great spirit in here through music. We appreciate that, and glad to see everyone today and see folks filtering on in here. I've been bouncing to some of the other classes and always like going to those, and so we are glad that you're here. And good to see Miss Brenda. Miss Brenda, how you doing? How's Rich doing? About the same? Yeah, okay. All right. And good deal. All right. Looks like, all right. So we're looking forward to what God has today. Next Sunday is Harvest Sunday. Say that with me. Harvest Sunday. I'm going to ask you to do something for me, for you, and most importantly, for the Lord. I'm going to ask you to take at least one tract and invite one person to Harvest Sunday. And, today would be a great day for it. And so if you want to grab more, I can guarantee that we won't fill every single seat in the building today, so you can reach over and grab your neighbors and that type of thing. I had a Christian tell me one time. He said, "Preacher, I'm going to have to be honest with you. I've never in my life, my whole Christian life, ever handed." You talk about passing out gospel tracts all the time. I've never handed out a gospel tract nor invited one person to church in my life. And I did it very lovingly. Okay, I know you don't think I can be loving, but I can be loving sometimes, every once in a while. And but very lovingly I said, and compassionately and very affectionately, I said, "Shame on you." He never confessed anything to me ever again, But he said it we laughed about it. He laughed about it. He received it, and he said, "I'm going to change that. I'm going to change it." And so and he did, by the way, he did. Do you understand that handing someone a gospel message is the easiest thing a Christian can do? Here's what's amazing about it. How many know, when I say this name, how many know who I'm talking about? Charles Spurgeon. Would you raise your hand? All right, several of you. All right. How many's ever read one of his sermons? Several of you. Wow, okay. And so how many's ever at least heard some of his quotes? All right, you've heard that. All right. Did you know that tract passing out was his favorite way to witness? All the way back in the 1850s. I mean, he would just walk up and down the streets of London and just hand gospel literature to people. And of course, his church was located right there in London. Here's the thing: putting the gospel in print is as old, all right, and passing something in print is as old as the finger of God. Are you with me on that? What did God do? What did he do to the Ten Commandments? He what? Wrote them. Say that with me. Wrote them. So I want to encourage you to grab a tract, and there's extras all over. I got one on every seat. There's 600 of them scattered around. And grab one and invite at least one person. I'm asking everybody to invite at least one person to church next week. And I've had people come to this church and get saved, and this is what they've told me. This is the only church in our whole life we were ever invited to. All right, now I'm talking about one-on-one invitations, not talking about somebody getting on a television or somebody getting on a radio and inviting through some type of paid advertisement. Literally, that this is the only church they've ever had an individual ever invite them to. And so I hope that you'll do that. How many of you know at least one person that ought to be in church? Would you raise your hand? We all know at least one person, and so that is good. On December the 2nd, we let me make sure I got my dates right because it had to be rescheduled. We originally had this scheduled for November the 4th. Yes, on Tuesday, December the 2nd. We originally had this scheduled for November the 4th, and the paperwork still says November the 4th, but due to Brother Jim Rainey's funeral it's had to be changed. And so on December the 2nd, which is a Tuesday, we're going to have a joint class field trip with the senior ambassadors. Everyone is invited to come. It will be a trip down to Claremont, Florida. We're going to take a bus. You can drive your car, but we're going to take a bus also. We're going to leave here about 8:30, and the bus will return late afternoon. But here's what's planned. It's a Presidential Hall of Fame in Claremont. It's a 1-hour guided tour. There's a small replica of the White House, wax museum of the presidents. There's a replica of the Oval Office. There's artifacts of the presidents, and there's also films. The admission is $10.94, so $11. And then there's a barbecue restaurant there called Oakwood Grill, and we're going to have lunch at Oakwood Grill and then come back. And so you're invited to go. Everyone, it's the two classes that are joining together. And so what I'm going to do is I need would somebody volunteer to help me with a sign-up sheet in here? Would somebody volunteer to do that? Going once, going twice. Miss Wendy will do this for me. All right. I was fixing to volunteer somebody, right? All right. And so thank you for that. I appreciate that. I saw her there just a second ago. And I've also got some flyers right up here on the front row. And so I got some flyers. And if you would like to go, if we could just see Miss Wendy and she'll put your name. She's got the sign-up sheet. The reason that we need to do this is to know exactly how many people's going and to be able to let the restaurant know how many. They've got big tables in the back and all that kind of stuff, so it would be good. Was there a question? Did y'all have a question about it? Oh, okay. You were volunteering too to help. Thank you for that. Okay, all right. I happened to, Miss Wendy was the first one that I saw, but thank you for that. And thank you, Miss Wendy, for being willing to do that. So if you're interested in going to the field trip, if you come, it's on Tuesday, December the 4th. All right, so keep that in mind. Turn to 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6. And Lord willing, I'm planning on going to it, my wife and I. And, for example, things happen all the time. We had this plan for November the 4th, and then I ended up having a funeral. And so I always let my pastoral duties, I always put pastoring over play. Does that make sense? All right. So with that in mind. In fact, did I just lose a light? What happened? Did the lights go down? No? Yes, it got darker up here. Am I going crazy? Yeah. So, all right. Something happened. All right. No, I'm not. I'm not going crazy, am I? Did something change? I'm not going. He said, I got one validification. I'm not going crazy. It got darker up here, and anyway, all right. And y'all have me going to the eye doctor today. Y'all play with me like this, all right? And 1 Timothy chapter 6. We're talking about the life of great gain. And look with me, if you would, at verse number 6. The Bible says, "But godliness with contentment is" what? All right, I don't know about you, but I would like a life of great gain. And I'm thankful that God has given me life. I'm thankful that the Lord has allowed me to be around as long as He's allowed. I certainly don't deserve it. And while I'm here for Him, I want to have a life of great gain. Now, we have talked about several things that he says that godliness with contentment is great gain. We talked about last week in verse 3 and 4 what godliness is disturbed by. It's disturbed by wrong teaching, verse 3. It's disturbed by pride in verse 4. And it's disturbed by doting in verse number 4, which is people with a diseased appetite, doting. He says about doters, doters always have questions. Doters always have strife of words. And in verse 4, he says when doters are done, strife is always left behind. In fact, he says when a doter finishes their work, what's left behind is envy, strife, railings, evil, surmisings, and perverse disputings. In other words, they tear things up. Ecclesiastes 9:18 says, "But one sinner destroyeth much good." And so we see this. We also looked in verse number 5 about the condition of those who disrupt godliness. God gives his own commentary of doters, people that disturb godliness. Of those that give the wrong teachings, the prideful and the doters. He says they, number one, have corrupt minds. He says, number two, they are destitute of truth. And then, number three, he says that they have a disrupted view of godliness. Look at what it says there in verse 5. He says about those that disrupt godliness, he says, verse 4, he is proud, knowing nothing, but doting about questions and strifes of words, whereof cometh envy, strife, railings, and evil surmising. Then he says, perverse disputings of men of corrupt minds and destitute of the truth, supposing that gain is godliness, and God says, from such withdraw thyself. Withdraw thyself. So God says, stay away from people who are doting. Stay away from people who are giving wrong teachings, and stay away from people who are of pride. And you know, we're not talking about somebody with a stumbled pride. We're talking about somebody who pridefully destroys the teachings of the Word of God and disobeys God. Now, with this in mind, let's pick up here at verse number 6. And God says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. Now, first of all, number one, godliness without contentment is not gain. Godliness without contentment is not gain. He says it's godliness with contentment. Because what happens when you do not have contentment, you will not be godly for very long. Are you with me on that? You'll end up diverting from godliness when you do not have contentment. Now, notice secondly, all right, contentment without godliness is dangerous. That's how people go to hell. When a person is content without godliness, they're in big trouble. Are you with me on that? By the way, a lot of people are content without godliness. God says godliness with contentment. So we cannot have godliness without contentment, and we cannot have contentment without godliness. You find a person who's content without godliness, you'll find a person who is very prideful about their sin. You'll find a person who is who loves darkness. You'll find a person who will split hell wide open because nothing bothers them, because they are content without their godliness. Are you with me on that? That is a dangerous place to be. And there's a lot of people in that position. Godliness without contentment makes us, we're unsatisfied with what God gives us. We're never fully satisfied with, we always feel like God owes me more. So God very specifically states that it's godliness with contentment, not godliness without contentment. Now, when we allow it, are you with me on this morning? Now, when we allow it, godliness will create the contentment if we will allow it. All right? Because godliness gives an atmosphere of contentment if we will allow godliness to have its way in our life. Godliness is the parent to contentment. Most without godliness will not have contentment, but most people that get godly and get filled with the Spirit of God, they will develop contentment because they realize that there's nothing greater than what God can give me. We ended on this last week, and I'll just remind you of Psalm 23:1. What does it say? The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not what? That's godliness with contentment. We're content with the shepherd, all right? And so we think about this. Godliness teaches us to know God. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Godliness brings us to know ourselves. And what happens is that when ourselves is exposed, we are discontent with us and content with God. So we want to stay with that godliness, and so godliness it points us to God. It helps us get to know God, and then we become content with Him, and then it shows us ourselves. So we get discontented with ourselves, and so if I can get discontented with me and very contented with God, I'll have godliness with contentment. Are you with me on that? I've got to get to the place I get discontented with me. I get sick of me. How many of you get sick of you? All right? Now, people, I'm just sick and tired, all right? And if you're sick and tired of you, you're in a great place because you're going to turn to someone stronger than you. And then if you'll get discontented with you and get contented with God, you'll end up developing godliness with contentment, all right? And so godliness teaches us to know God. Godliness brings us to know ourselves. We have by nature discontentment in our flesh. We're always wanting more. The Bible says the eye is never satisfied. We want more than what we've been given. Bible examples of that was Samson was a discontented person. He was never satisfied with what God gave him. God gave him, what more could Samson have gotten? God gave him special power, spiritual powers that even transposed into physical powers, gave him the leadership of Israel, and he was not content. What a discontented man. Think about Korah. Korah was used in the spiritual leadership of Israel, but he wasn't content. He wanted to be Moses. Think about David. David had everything. God said, David, if you would have wanted anything else, I would have given it to you. And the one thing that God did not give him, he wanted, and he took her. And he was discontented. Solomon became discontented with all the wisdom and the riches of the world. And Ananias and Sapphira had gotten discontented with the fear of God and the blessings of benevolence. And you say, preacher, why are you giving those examples? Because I'm telling you, it's easy to get discontented. We start looking at what God hasn't given us rather than what God has given us. And I want to tell you something. If God didn't give it to you, you didn't need it anyway. If God doesn't give it to you, you really don't want it. Okay? And I remember my dad was telling me one time about I was thinking about buying a vehicle, and it was going to be a big payment, and he tried to talk me out of it, and he did, but he said, son, I want to tell you a story. He said, you get your eyes on something and you think you got to have it. And he said, let me tell you, he said, I bought me a car one time. He told me about the car, and it was something that he wanted. And he said, I own that thing. And he said, I enjoyed it for about the first 60 days until the reality of how much that thing was costing me every month came to be. And he said, I grew to hate that car because it put me in so much financial bondage. Okay? And here's the thing. We think we want something. And God hasn't given it to us. And we, in our discontentment, we just demand that we're going to have it. And we find out later that there's a reason why God didn't give it to us. That the truth is we were happier without it. You ever notice children sometimes? All adults are just... somebody said one time about, he was joking, a pastor said, listen, if you can run a nursery, you can run a church. Think about that just a little bit. Now that's not true, all right, but he was joking about it because really, in essence, we're all just we're just children and big bodies, right? And but have you ever noticed a child can be happy and just joyful until they get something? And then when they get something, they become mean and discontented. And here's this loving child, and all of a sudden they get an item they want, and something happens to them. Their brother or sister can walk by and touch that item, and they go, mine. It changed their personality because they got something. All right, you understand what I'm saying? And what does mom and dad do? Mom and dad say, give that back. Give that to me. You've lost that. You can't play with this for, and why? Because you got to get it away to fix their contentment, okay? It's funny how things can actually destroy our contentment. And, people are mad at God because God won't give them a certain amount of money or give them this or give them that or give them that. And God knows that that individual is maybe not strong enough in godliness yet to be able to handle that. It'll change their contentment in life. And so we have that. Number 3, godliness brings us to know God is always just. He never does us wrong. He never does us wrong. He gives us more than we deserve. He will truly we are truly unworthy of all that we have, and God dispenses as He sees fit. The Bible, the Bible, the Bible it tells us that all good gifts come down from the Father of lights, and who is no variables of turning in the book of James. And so as we think about this, God is just. He always gives us what we need. And so we need to get to this godliness that teaches us to know God, this godliness that brings us to know ourselves, and this godliness that brings us to know justice. It was kind of funny. I was laughing because several years ago in the same week, I met a Gentile who was angry that they were not a Jew. They were doing everything. I mean, they went to Jewish synagogues. They kept all of the, and I'd give anything that I would be born a Jew. And in the same week, I met a Jew that was angry that they were not born a Gentile. And I got to laughing. It's amazing how man is never satisfied with what they are, you know. And so it's amazing thing. And so I want you to know that godliness brings us to a life of faith. Godliness brings us to a life of faith. Say that with me. Godliness brings us to a life of faith. So let's think about several things. Number one, godliness teaches us to know God. Godliness brings us to the place that we learn ourselves. Godliness brings us to the place that we realize that God is just in everything He's given us. Everything. God is just. It doesn't matter what we are, what we have. God is just. He knew us. We are fearfully and wonderfully made, and He gives us. Number four, godliness brings us to a life of faith. Godliness brings us to a life of faith. Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. You know, godliness with contentment. When I'm godly, I have faith in God for what I need. It's the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And so with this in mind, if I'm living a life of faith, if I have faith in God, I'm trusting Him, and therefore it brings me to a place of contentment. I'm content because I know Him. I'm content because I know how discontented I am, and so I'm going to get discontented with myself. I'm content because I know God is just and always does the right thing. I'm content because I'm living by faith, and when I'm living by faith, I know that God is going to come through when I need Him the most, and when His time is right. Godliness also brings us to the place of prayer. If we want more, we need to ask God for it. We have not because we ask not. And so if we want more, we need to ask God. God is the giver of gifts, and if I want something that I don't have, I just need to pray for it. And I pray for it till I get it, or God changes my prayer. I don't need to just bust through the door. I remember when my wife she was diagnosed with cancer in August of 2011. We 1.5 weeks into that, we sat down in front of our oncologist and found out how serious this was. Found out that it was stage 4. The oncologist looked at my wife and said, "I'm going to diagnose you as a stage 3A. Because at your age, if I diagnose you with where you are, stage 4, then all I will be allowed to do as your doctor is to treat you. But I can go for a cure if I diagnose you as a stage 3A. And we said, "Doc, whatever you want to do." And she looked at her and she said, "If I'm going to take a year, but I'm going to do everything I can by the grace of God to give you your life back." And we didn't know. I remember the meeting that we were in, and the oncologist was talking about the medicine that was going to be used, and we did a lot of praying up to that point. God led us in this and knew that this was the path that He wanted us to take. And boy, you talk about your faith being challenged, because the oncologist looked at my wife and she made the comment. She said, "If it works." And I said, "Doc, what happens if it doesn't work?" And she says, well, we have some clinical trials and things like that we could look into at that point. We knew what that meant. And so basically the doctor was saying we got one shot at this. And so, but as we were looking at this and going forward, and I was working so hard. I was gathering information, doing this, praying, trying to get God's this. And boy, I was frustrated because trying to get a doctor and an insurance company on the same page. And man, I was working on this, and I was literally, I was just doing everything I can to knock doors down. And it's like God just grabbed me and said, would you stop? Quit trying to bust doors down. You're trying to knock doors down that I don't want open. And we prayed, and we just I just come to the end of myself, because here I am I've talked to several men whose wives were diagnosed with cancer, and one of the hardest things in the world for a husband, and some of y'all may know what I'm talking about, is you can't fix it. You want to fix it, but you can't. And so I had to come to the end of myself and realize God's in control of this thing. And we begin to pray. And you know what I found out is that prayer opens doors a lot faster than shoulders. Are you with me on that? Prayer opens doors, and it opens the right doors. And so if we want something, okay, if we are struggling with discontentment and we want something, go to God in prayer. Okay, that's what a contented person does and will do. Godliness not only will bring us to prayer if we want more, godliness will bring us to desiring only what God wills for us to have. Turn to Matthew chapter 6. Let me show you this real quickly. Matthew chapter 6 and verse number 10. And it brings us to the place of only wanting what God wills for us to have. Now, when your desires and God's desires begin to line up and match, you are in a wonderful place. Matthew chapter 6, look at verse number 10. And notice the prayer. Notice the prayer here. This is what we're supposed to pray as we pray through this prayer outline. He says this, Thy kingdom come, and read it with me now. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Here's what this prayer he's teaching us to pray is, Lord, I want your will for my life on earth as if I was already in heaven. I want to be in the center of the will of God as if I was already in heaven. In other words, I want heaven's will on my life completely. And then the next statement is, give us this day our daily bread. So whatever you want me to have this day, I pray for you to give it, but only in your will. And see, this is why in the model prayer, he teaches us to surrender to his kingdom and surrender to his will before we ever ask for a thing. Because we need to be praying in the will of God. And when our desire for our life matches God's desire for our life, we are in a very, 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 very contented place. Are you with me on that this morning? And so godliness with contentment is great gain. And so this is why godliness is so important, because godliness is what will create that contentment. Unless you and I hinder that contentment with our own discontentment, but I'm telling you something, if you give way to discontentment, it will not be long before you have no godliness. Because discontentment will destroy godliness. Are you with me on that? Now, I want you to look at the passage with me, and I want to give you some things here. And notice some things that we need to do. You say, how many could say, preacher, I want to have godliness with contentment? And my hand goes up. Does your hand? All right. So here's some things that we need to do. Let's look at the passage, and let's look at several things that need to be done if we want godliness with contentment. All right. Now, I love when you study the words great gain. I love that when you study that in the Greek, and you know what it means? It means mega furnishings. Not MAGA, but mega. Okay, all right. Not MAGA furnishings, but mega furnishings. I can tell you one thing. Even though I'm thankful for a lot of things in MAGA, you need a lot more than what MAGA has to offer you. All right. Mega, M-E-G-A, it means mega furnishings. Mega furnishings, all right? And I mean, just loaded. So here's the bottom line. Godliness with contentment is this great gain. God says, if you have godliness with contentment, I'm going to give you mega furnishings. And so how do we do this? Well, number one, let me go back to verse 5. I want to say this real quickly. Do not be around discontented people. Do not be around discontented people. Stay away from men of corrupt minds, destitute of the truth, supposing that gain is godliness. From such withdraw thyself. Get away from discontented people. Because discontented people will make you discontented. Okay? They'll always be pointing out what they have that you need, or they'll be pointing out what either you both don't have, or they'll be pointing out what you don't have that you should have. All right? So don't be around discontented people. All right? If you find people that are discontented in their finances and their positions in life, their marriage, their jobs, their church, their status in life, stay away from them. Do not get around discontented people. And God commands you to withdraw yourself. They will destroy you. They will take what you're happy about, and start messing with you. All right, they'll have you so discontented you'll be jumping off the bridge with them. Okay, and don't do that. All right, number two. Realize we brought nothing in this world. All right, look at verse 7. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. So we came with nothing and we leave with nothing. So everything in between is a blessing from God. Are you with me on that? Everything in between is a blessing of God. Okay? So we just need to get contented. All right? And so realize that we brought nothing in this world. And it's and it's not just to discontented with things, but we literally came in just us. We will leave just us. So when we remember that, everything in between is God's blessings. Remember what Job did? Job said, God hath given and God hath taken away. If everything belongs to God, does he have the right to take something away? Sometimes we're discontented because of I know people that are mad at God because of a loss of a loved one. I recently talked to someone, why did God take so-and-so out of my life? And why did he allow that? Okay. Here's the bottom line. We may not have all the answers till we get to heaven. In heaven we have perfect knowledge. But I do know this. I know that Job said, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Because the truth is, it's all his anyway. It was his to give. It was his to take away. And so with this in mind, we have to realize that wherever we are in life, we have more than we started with. And we have more than we're going to take with us. The only thing that we can take with us is what we have done for the Lord, the treasures that we lay up in heaven in Matthew chapter 6. But he's talking about contentment, the things that people literally, they destroy their life over. And he says, I'm reminding you that you're taking nothing out, you brought nothing in, so quit making something the center point of your life. And some people cannot move on with life. They'll never have contentment ever again because they can't get over an event that happened. Okay, we've just got to realize this. God says we realize that we brought nothing into this world. Everything was supplied by God. Realize that we take nothing out. And watch this. Look at verse number 8. Realize that there are really only two necessities in life. There's only two things that God really, 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 really promises us. All right, look what he says in verse 8. And having food and raiment, let us be therewith what? Now, the only thing that we have a right to be discontented with is not having food and not having raiment. But really, the only thing God says, if you've got food and you've got raiment, you've got enough to be contented with. Yeah, but I don't have the relationship I wanted. That's not a right to be discontented. I don't have the car. That's not a right to be discontented. I don't have the home. I don't live where I would. That's not the right to be contented. God says, if you got food and raiment, be content. How many of God's people are violating that principle right now at this very moment? I'm not necessarily talking about it here, but I'm talking about worldwide. And so he says, having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. And so we think about this. What did the Apostle Paul say? The Apostle Paul said, "I've learned that no matter what state I am going to be content." Paul had trained himself, disciplined himself, and that came from his godliness. That it didn't matter if he was in chains in a jail cell, or if he was walking free, heading from town to town, planting churches. It didn't matter. He was going to choose to be content. And so having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. So this is the only two necessities real in life. And so we have this. And then notice this. Notice in verse number 9. Notice what he says. He commands us not to will to be rich. All right, and this is a big battle. He says this in verse 9, "But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a" what? So there's two things, all right? There's two things, a temptation and a snare, "and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition, they that will be rich." Money is a god in our world today. In America, it is a god. It's what people literally live for. Is much as I encourage and even encourage young couples to read Dave Ramsey. I'll many times give young couples their books about how to get out of debt and how to stay out of debt and live on cash and all that kind of thing. It even bothers me as much as he talks about becoming a millionaire. And listen to me carefully. God does make millionaires. There's no doubt about it if we do the right thing. But God says, be careful about what your will is. Let me tell you what our will should be. Our will should be to do His will, whatever it is. That should be our will. And God talks about the one who wills to be rich. The person who is living for money, God says 4 things will happen to them. Are you ready? He says, number 1, they will fall. They will fall. You're living for money, you will fall into temptation. Number 2, you will fall into a snare. That's a trap. You will fall into a snare. Number 4, you will fall into many foolish and hurtful lusts. And then, number 3 I meant, and then number 4, you will be drowned in destruction and perdition. Are you with me on that? People who will be rich, this will happen. I read an article of what has happened to the 50 most wealthiest people in the United States of America and the 50 most wealthiest people in the world. And do you realize that the majority of them die with nothing? The majority of them died with nothing, all right? And so, now, there's nothing, listen to me very, very carefully. If God blesses you and you become rich, is that necessarily wrong? He says, don't will to be. All right, be in His will. That be your will, okay? And I had somebody say to me one time, why are you going to preach? There's no money in it. I said, I'm not chasing money. And so the thing about it is, God has a plan. God has a plan, and we need to do His will. Look at verse number 10. All right. And he says the 6th thing he tells us to do in this passage is don't fall in love with it. He says, for the love of money is the root of all evil. He didn't say money was the root of all evil. He said the love of money, the passion for it. For the love of money is the root of all evil. All right? And so so here's the bottom line. Here's what he's saying. If you want to trace what motivated evil, just trace the love of money. Okay? It's the love of money that creates sin businesses. Somebody sent me an article. One of our church members sent me an article today of how many beer companies are struggling financially. One's over $109 million in debt, and several beer companies are in danger of bankruptcy. Oh, horrible. You know, and so he was sitting in a class one time that I said, pray for alcohol businesses to go bankrupt. He said, preacher, God may be answering your prayer. Alcohol is what destroyed Israel, according to Isaiah. And it destroys everything it touches. God says, at the end, it bites like an adder in the book of Proverbs. And so the best thing in the world could ever happen is alcohol businesses go bankrupt. But the negative thing is marijuana soaring at the moment. You with me on that? So people go from one substance to another. And so, but as we think about this, the love of money is the root of all evil. Watch what he says. Which while some, what's that word? Who covets? Talk to him for a second. Who covets? A discontented person. A discontented person covets. All right? Now look what he says. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have what? Erred from the faith. I've seen that 30 years of ministry. I've watched people fall like whatever, and pierce themselves through with many sorrows. And I've seen that happen too, because they love money. All right, and so he tells us not to covet money. It's very, very, very dangerous. And so you say, preacher, what are you trying to say? I'm just trying to say God says godliness with contentment is great gain. And if we want a mega furnished life, if we want God to furnish our life and fill our life mega, he says, get godliness and get contentment, because that is great gain. Godliness without contentment is not good enough. And contentment without godliness is not good enough. We need godliness with contentment. And all of the surrounding verses support that truth. And may God help us with that. And so we need to decide this morning, number one, to be godly, and then to grab contentment. And the godliness will feed the contentment if we will allow it. And so I hope that little passage was a blessing. I had that on my heart and began to teach that last week. And so with that in mind, I hope that passage was a blessing to you, and promised you I would finish it. And I got about 2-3 minutes. Any questions about anything? Any Bible questions or questions about church life? Anything like that? Any questions? I'll do a question and answer time. Anything over the next 2.5 minutes? Yes, sir. Oh, need 100 more cookies for next Sunday? Okay, all right. We need 100 cookies for next Sunday. That's a very, very important need to fill. And anybody in here that could help bring some cookies that's not already obligated to do that? Not already obligated? Anybody here? All right. And we got a couple hands going up. Okay, there's a sign-up sheet on the back. If you could do that, that would be fantastic. And so that would be great. Yes, sir. The cookies are for Harvest Sunday next week. After service, we're going to go outside for cookies and apple cider. And got a couple little contests. Got cornhole contest, and the bounce houses will be still left out from the Trail of Adventure for the kids to jump on. And the kids are having walking tacos. Adults don't get walking. Anybody ever had a walking taco? All right. And so anybody here not know what a walking taco is? Anybody know? All right, very good. I don't know either. So so anyway, I think it's I'm not going to tell you, because anyway, I don't want to mess it up, because if I got it wrong, I'll mess it up. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Okay, let me make sure I understood the question. The Bible talks about faith without works is dead. Okay, so a faith without a work, would that be like godliness without contentment? Okay. Oh, good question. Faith will produce the work. God says, because James says, show me thy faith without thy works, and I'll show you my faith by my works. So faith produces the work. True faith produces the work. So faith without works is not really faith in itself. So godliness without contentment. The truth is, I was dividing this thing up, but let me give you the big picture. You're not going to really have godliness without contentment, because without contentment there is no godliness, because godliness creates the contentment, and contentment fuels the godliness. So with that in mind, I think we would be hard-pressed to find, and it goes back to what I was saying, godliness without contentment, because there won't be godliness very long. We'll be hard-pressed to find godliness without contentment, because contentment gives the foundation, and it gives the proper soil for godliness to grow. So I don't know if I answered that question. Please forgive me if I did not. If I laid an egg right there, I'd be happy to get with you. With that in mind, doing the best. Yes, ma'am. It's December 2nd. December 2nd. It was originally, that's an old sheet that was originally scheduled for November 4th. But if you'd like to go to that field trip with the two classes, if you would see Miss Wendy. Miss Wendy, if you could stand and kind of wave for folks that may not know who you are. Right here, she's got it right here. So if you'd like to go, please let her know, and that would go. All right, we'll dismiss, and it's time. Church will start here in about 12 minutes. God bless you. Please don't forget to fill out your communication card this morning and put your track numbers on it. I appreciate it. Thank you. And don't forget to pass out a Harvest Sunday tract today.